Now, let me skip to the last section, which is talking about political and legal authority. I just want to show that this land, this civilization was ordained in a seemingly very good way. Their arrangements for the distribution of authority and office were the following: each of the 10 kings had absolute power. I know this seems very in a way like a tyrant, but it seems that people did not protest because they saw this divine authority given by Poseidon. So, like, seemingly they were happy. So each of the 10 kings had absolute power in his own region and city over persons and in general over laws, and could punish or execute at will. So, woe to you if you did not live righteously or appeasing to this king, which was a semi-deity, right? But the distribution of power between them and their mutual relations were governed by the injunctions of Poseidon, enshrined in the law and engraved by the first kings on an, again, this orichalc pillar in the temple of Poseidon in the middle of the island. Here they assembled alternatively every fifth and sixth year, consulted on matters of mutual interest, and inquired into and gave judgment on any wrong committed by any of them. And before any prospective judgment, they exchanged mutual pledges in the following ceremony. They were in the temple of Poseidon, bulls roaming at large. Again, we come to bulls. The 10 kings, after praying to the gods, after praying to their father Poseidon, that they might secure a sacrifice that would please him, entered alone and started a hunt for a bull using clubs and nooses, but no metal weapon. And when they caught him, they cut his throat over the top of the pillar so that the blood flowed over the inscription. And on the pillar were the engraved, in addition to the laws, an oath invoking awful curses on those who disobeyed it. When they had finished the ritual of sacrifice and were consecrated the limbs of the bull, they mixed a bowl of wine and dropped in a clot of blood for each of them before cleansing the pillar and burning the rest of the blood. After this, they drew wine from the bowl in golden cups, poured a libation over the fire, and swore an oath to give judgment in accordance with the laws given on the pillar, to punish any past offenses, never knowingly in future to transgress what was written, and finally neither to give nor obey orders unless they were in accordance with the laws of their father. Okay, I'll stop reading here. Wow. Okay, so again, we see very Old Testamentish sacrifices, altar, blood of the bulls, similar to Yahweh, but this is dedicated to Poseidon. So we see something that is copied. When I say copied, I don't mean that the ancient Greeks took this literally from the Old Testament, but the same ritual was taken from
Right.
something
Exactly.
older. So from the people of God, but not for Yahweh. It was done for to Poseidon. It never says that Poseidon then further gave glory to Yahweh. No, he would just take it for
Exactly.
himself. And even though it's noble that his sons, the 10 kings, wanted to judge righteously and would give oath, even to the point of like the curse would come back if they would judge unrighteously. But that righteous judgment was ultimately judged by Poseidon. There was no higher
Mhm.
authority than him, at
That's
least
right.
in Atlantis. So again, I'm thinking, even though we don't know much what was happening between Deuteronomy 32 and Psalm 82, damn, like first, none of them give praise to Yahweh, the God of the Bible,
That's
the
right.
one true creator. And second, who is to say that even though, let's say, hypothetically speaking, if they had good intentions and tried to judge righteously, that they actually obeyed and fulfill what Yahweh would give all these deities allotted to different nations? What if they were
Right.
judging unrighteously? Because first we have to remember, even if they had some good intentions and laws, which I have to believe they had, because it cannot be that, you know, if we disagree with someone, like we will think, oh, they're the most horrible people ever. Like even with Hitler, we can find some probably good attributes, like he loved
Yeah.
children, he loved animals, whatever. Like just because we disagree with someone or don't like them, that doesn't mean that we should ascribe the worst of anything to them. No, let's be honest and
Right.
say this was good, this was wrong. Okay, so they probably had very good stuff. Otherwise, their civilization would be ruined long ago. Yet we see from the very beginning, Poseidon did the same thing as the Watchers, the fallen ones, did
That's
in
right.
Genesis 6, and procreate with people, and that's how Nephilim came to be. Um, I'm done with reading what Cretius was recording. I don't know if you want to just comment on what I was saying, how the whole Atlantis was structured, and how even though they had some good laws, there was no judge higher than Poseidon. So in that way, like, it's very possible that if this entity does exist, that calls himself itself Poseidon, that God will judge him the same way
Yeah.
that he's judging those installated too.
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think you're exactly right. I thought it was interesting, like you noted, that you've got the bull imagery again here, and I actually I wanted to try to pull up this article that I was gonna reference for you, but it doesn't really matter. The article, if I find it, I'll send it to you later, and you can link it in the bottom or whatever. But it's so archaeologists, or I should say, I guess I'll go back a little further. Anthropologists used to claim that religion was something that evolved over time. And what they would try to say is that, well, early people worshipped forces of nature, worshipped like divine beings as forces of nature. And then this got sort of developed into a pantheon, and then this would get developed into monotheism, and then monotheism would get developed into like, Christianity or whatever. Well, we've actually discovered that that's not true. Archaeologists have discovered two things. First is that actually the opposite is true. What we actually find is that most cultures start out with a very rich, very full, and beautiful and impressive theology. Like, for example, the ancient Chinese had just a very deeply and very similar to Christianity theology, very very important to them. And then over time, it gets kind of weirder and weirder, and different things come in. And by the way, the whole thing about worshiping forces of nature, totally made up. Ancient people didn't do that. But I digress from that. So we actually see a devolution of from super ancient religions to later paganism. And what's fascinating, though, is archaeologists have also found that there are these worship sites that do not correlate to anything else, really. The only reason why this site would have existed was for the purpose of worship, which shows that from the first moments that human beings had any sort of civilization, we have always worshipped. But when you get to the point in the archaeology where people are starting to have polytheism, Nicola, can you guess what the first god people start worshiping looks like?
Probably someone like themselves, maybe their divinized ancestor.
Well, it's actually, you're really close. So it's actually a person with a bull head. Almost universally, when people start, maybe not in like China or Japan, but at least in the Middle East, this is universal, and in a lot of other places too. So there's like tons of examples of this, where the first temple that gets erected to what we would call a false god, it's like a bull. It's a human with a bull head, including ancient Greece. People think ancient Greece, they're like, oh, the Greek gods always looked like people. That's not true. The earliest depictions we have of the Greek gods, they look a lot more like the Egyptian gods, where they're like people with animal heads, and Zeus has the head of a bull and Hera has the head of a cow. And there's even a reference to that in Homer, where I think it's Odysseus prays to Hera, and he calls her "O cow-eyed Hera," and it's a reference to this more ancient practice of portraying their gods with animal heads. So I didn't mean for that to be such a long tangent. I just wanted to share that because once again we see this imagery of these bulls in Atlantis, and I think that's really significant. And then the only other thing I was going to contribute to that is you rightly pointed out that Poseidon isn't giving glory to Yahweh. And I would also point out that, Plato is saying that the Atlantean kings were judging justly and that they were so righteous and all of this. But we should remember that, he's not getting this from the Bible. He's getting this from the mythology that is given to them. So this is from the demonic propaganda. That the demons are saying, yeah, our guys ruled really well and you guys were happy under our rulership. I'm not sure how seriously I take that. Maybe it's true. Maybe they were righteous. Like, we do have examples of some ancient kings who really were very righteous men despite being pagan. And so I'm not saying it's impossible, but I am saying that I'm not going to take their word for it just because just because their propagandists say they did a good job. I'm not going to necessarily buy that they did.